How's it going? It's your boy, friend Tinoco, coming at you from my little nook at the extreme southern end of North Memphis, telling you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. Again, making this centric to U.S. Mexico relations, um, or affairs, or sports, or whatnot. Um, this comes from a special request. And my special request is from Lydia. Lydia, who is somebody who lives, I believe, in Pittsburgh now, who I met about 8 years ago or so. No, yeah, 8 years ago in the dance scene here in town. And so she's someone I respect and admire as intellectual. And her question to me is, what do you think about the incoming Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum? For those who don't know, Mexico had their presidential elections that wrapped up back in June of this year, or June 2nd, actually. By the way, June 2nd was on a Sunday, so everybody got to vote. And it was a very high turnout. And Claudia Sheinbaum um, basically walked all over the opponents by double digits, and the first digit was not one. Um, yeah, she is a not hand-picked successor. That's such baloney at the highest levels of U.S. mainstream press. She's been labeled as a hand-picked successor, as if it was Kamala Harris style, and and there wasn't an actual contest, a nationwide contest, administered by the party itself, the Morena Party. But yeah, so she is for decades, has been a collaborator and collaborated with the current and outgoing president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, in the fight for pluralistic, um, uh, democratic, and nationalist rule, as in Mexico First rule. And so her job, prior to her running for office, because you have to give up your current government office to run for higher office in Mexico. Her job was mayor of Mexico City for the prior 5 years. And as such, I can tell you, as someone who has traveled to Mexico City frequently over the last 5 years, from what I saw, she's doing a wonderful job. Wonderful job. There have been, knowing that she was a leading candidate, there have been numerous attempts in the recent years to derail her as a political figure, namely a sabotage of a Mexican mass transit line, which people have died from. One of them being an elevated line, while another was a decoupled subway line, which led to a crash. So basically, the subway maintenance workers were part of the patronage of one of the opposition parties. And so, this was they were sloppy about it. And they were, brought to heel, and people were arrested over that. Another time, unfortunate death of a young lady at the hands of an opposition politician from the neighboring state of Morelos was actually tried to be pinned on her. And so that was a very unfortunate incident for sure. But yeah, that's wild. But anyway, what do I think about her? Well, first of all, also she is not only Mexico's first woman president, about to be, but Mexico's first Jewish president. Claudia Sheinbaum has um, grandparents who emigrated from Bulgaria and Lithuania. Um, and so she's been born to these, uh, you know, born to these sets of, the sons of and daughters of these sets of grandparents. And by the way, her positions are not um, pro-Zionist, but they're largely pro-two-state solution, pro-peace out there. Um, interestingly enough. So, yeah, ostensibly she's done a very good job. So the concern or the opportunity was offered in places like the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal to large sources of news surrounding Mexico stateside because of the attention on the issues from investors and major employers that are exposed to Mexico. Has been, whoa, maybe Claudia Sheinbaum was an opportunity to moderate the socialist policies of the predecessor. No. No. Let me tell you. All indications, all spoken policies, all retorts to U.S. Intervention and opinion. I mean, there have been many attempts for the U.S. to influence policy in Mexico recently, and the current president answered back right in line with what the I'm sorry, Claudia Sheinbaum has been answering back right in line with the what the president of Mexico says. Butt out. Ken Salazar, U.S. ambassador to Mexico. Joe Biden, put a muzzle and put a leash around your DEA and CIA agents, as if that were really possible. But the right thing to do is answer diplomatically to your counterpart, right? Claudia Sheinbaum is a Stanford trained environmental engineer, so she speaks English. So her advocacy for Mexican issues and issues of interest to Mexican immigrants to the United States, for example, are going to be spoken to in English by Governor Sheinbaum, President-elect Sheinbaum, in U.S. outlets. What is the result of this going to be? Well, she's going to ruffle her feathers directly. It's not going to be like, oh, they're going to say this and this about Claudia Sheinbaum. You're going to hear about it from her herself. She's going to continue with the further moves to energy independence for Mexico. She's obviously going to further environmental protections in Mexico to the detriment of certain profits from U.S. and other foreign-based companies. I'm considering possibly beverage companies. Interesting about beverage companies. A lot of them have major investments in the northern part of Mexico, which is arid. So they suck up a lot of the water resources. But there's ample fresh water, underground, percolated, filtered in the southern part of Mexico, which is further south, right? Which is like near the Yucatan, near around Mexico City and further south. Beverage companies, U.S. beverage companies, don't like that because they export to the United States and they have to extend the distance, right? The good thing is that the rail capacity of Mexico, both passenger and cargo, is now shifting from, according to Governor Sheinbaum's priorities, now that the South and Southeast has its very strategic cargo and passenger rail lines in order, they're going to do that to go from mostly Mexico City and or southern Gulf ports northward, and Guadalajara northward, all the way to the U.S. border. When the cargo railroad concessions were or divvied up, and the U.S. Based interest will be Kansas City Canadian, something like that. Kansas City Southern bought up most of those rail lines in Mexico. They closed the passenger rail service, so there was no passenger rail service. Well, she will continue on with many passenger rail service and cargo rail services that are going to aid in the logistics for people and shippers in the southern and central part of Mexico, especially with respect to connecting it to the northern part of Mexico and the border. So that's going to be very good eventually, even for beverage companies. By the way, Mexico is the number one exporter of beer in the world. That's why that's important. And so that'll give some relief, hopefully, to strained aquifers in the northern part of the arid, heavily populated areas of the northern part of Mexico. She has been very eloquent in her denunciations of a U.S.-backed, as in U.S. special interest-backed, Mexico special interest-backed, corrupt set of opposition parties that have been voted out of many local and state governments and legislatures. She's been a heavy supporter of what is probably going to be the inevitable judicial reform. She will continue many of the programs. I don't see how there is going to be very likely any moderation to the direction that the current president is going in. It's going to be an extension of the current, for another 6 years, of the current president's Mexico First, nationalistic, balanced, social democrat development of Mexico. More people coming out of poverty, more people having access to higher education, more graduates in STEM degrees, even more U.S. investment, higher regulations of this U.S. investment so as to not only share the gains but reduce the social and costs and now other negative externalities like pollution, like tax deals. Let's be real. If you go to the tax deals in the United States to companies are given because, among many things, high labor costs. In Mexico, you have that. So hopefully I think for Mexico, she will further, she will actually eliminate a lot of these deals for reprieval of taxes for investing in Mexico, because there are savings to be made anyway. With more infrastructure investment that cause employment in Mexico, that reduce costs for doing business in Mexico, that'll still be a major attraction. Hopefully, she will, she won't sell the store for investment in Mexico, because Mexico already enjoys very low unemployment rates, as in below 5%, which is low for them historically. So for there to be a mad race for Chinese, American, Canadian, German, English, French companies, Japanese companies, Korean companies into Mexico, which actually that's a very fair characterization of the nationalities of companies that are now investing in Mexico or increasing their investments in Mexico. I would say, hopefully that this can pre-select, instead of it being a mad dash, you can pre-select and make a more sustainable increase in foreign direct investment, so as not to completely eliminate the underemployment or unemployment issue, and raise wages and raise inflation in a way that the supply of goods and services couldn't keep up, and therefore cause inflation, right? So, but it would obviously elevate standards of living for people in Mexico, and elevate their ability to purchase from the United States. This kind of long-term thinking isn't very predominant in corporate circles in the United States, but that's why you have a government that regulates and referees these things, so as to make sure everybody gains. Anyway, that's just, I'm interjecting. She's obviously very environmentally conscious. Mexico City has a number of very good investments there with mass transit, basically with greater metropolitan commuter lines to Toluca, to Puebla, to the airport, and eventually the new airport, eventually to Pachuca, which is to the north, and Querétaro, which is a little further north. So basically the next set of cities in 3 different directions. Yeah, so building up those commuter lines, and also solid waste recycling, and also creating the big Lake Texcoco park, which probably would, I think, the biggest urban park in the world. Is going to be it's basically a abandoned airport project, which is going to lead to the development and preservation and the showcasing of the wetland areas that and the biodiversity of the wetland areas within immediate vicinity of the largest metropolitan area of North America. So that's kind of cool. So I don't think that there's going to be a lot of friction between the United States and Mexico between now and the end of Dr. Sheinbaum's term. But Dr. Sheinbaum is probably, unless the U.S. stuck a knife to her throat, figuratively or literally, I don't see how it's going to change anything. The U.S. has its hands full with Ukraine, with Israel. Probably, I don't know how much longer the U.S. is going to be trying to deal in Venezuela to try and invest in toppling things over there. But yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. Let's see if Dr. Sheinbaum is successful in rebuffing direct U.S. special operations or military intervention. What does the U.S. want? The U.S. wants control over several things in Mexico. They want control over the Trans-Isthmus Railway, which is a railway that basically takes excess capacity away from the Panama Canal, so containers could be dropped off in the Pacific coast and take a 300-kilometer or 240 or 230 mile trip directly north to the Gulf of Mexico and southward. Is, the concept is already proven. Of course, why wouldn't the United States want to control that? A lot of shipping revenue, shipping services revenue, unloading, reconnecting, shipping across, reloading, all that stuff is billed to shippers by, right now, it looks like the Mexican Army or Mexican Navy. Again, they're going to be billing these, billing these shippers and carriers for it, billing these carriers for it. So the U.S. also wants control over the lithium. Elon Musk has made very public challenges to the current administration with respect to its control over the lithium industry. Auto manufacturers in Mexico, both for the U.S. and the Mexican market, they won't have control of the lithium, but they will have access to it. They'll have to buy it from the Mexican government, the Mexican lithium industry, in the form of actually fabricated batteries, which is going to bring a tremendous amount of wealth to the Mexican treasury and indirectly to the Mexican people. Oil is going to be, because of the struggles of the EV industry, oil is going to be continuing to be a very predominant source of energy for the next generation, at least. So further programs for Mexico to develop extraction, refining, and coking in oil, and it's growing discoveries of petroleum reserves in the southern Gulf Coast is going to keep them energy independent, and with elevated prices due to United States military adventures, it's going to be a big source of profit that's going to prop up the peso. Tourism is going to continue. One of these days, the U.S. is going to have to come around and deal with addiction, because hopefully Governor Sheinbaum, now President-elect Sheinbaum, is going to continue to speak to the United States, to speak to our people, Mexican, American, Mexican, and otherwise, directly, to say, you need to do something about addiction in your country. You need to do something about arms trafficking in your country. You need to do something about the internal drug trafficking in your country. Because let's face it, the Zetas, the New Generation Jalisco Cartel, the Sinaloa Cartel are not delivering drugs door to door in the United States, and they're not force feeding people the drugs. This is a U.S. origin problem. And it's not just me saying it. More people are realizing it. So, President-elect Sheinbaum is going to be able to speak directly in English to the American people on this. So she's going to ruffle a lot of feathers. I can tell you right now, this lady is going to ruffle a lot of feathers. On the flip side of that, a lot of people are going to look at her and wonder why the U.S. can't have her for president or elect someone like her for president. And that will be another entirely different set of challenges for us to grapple as a country. So this is a friend Tinoco coming at you live from the intersection of the Idlewild Avenue and VE line in the southern edge of North Memphis. Bye-bye.